Well, I think there's probably the main reason was because I wanted to develop my career. I did quite a lot of research before I started it into the Delta versus the diploma, and I decided that as I'm really interested in pronunciation and really helping learners learn English and speaking, etc., that I would do the diploma. I wanted to be perhaps a bit more research based. There's a famous phrase about doing a diploma helps you understand why the books are written the way they're written, for example, the course books. And I think that's a good sort of way of looking at it. I felt I kind of loved what I was doing. I was very passionate, but I didn't always feel I could explain to someone why I was doing what I was doing. Or if someone came to my class, I didn't really feel I could say the rationale for why I was teaching in a particular way. Well, there's a mixture of assessments. You get assignments as you go through the different types of areas. I worked particularly hard on the assignments because I felt that would help me later on in terms of the exam and different phases of the course. There is different assignments on all the different areas that you can imagine. Obviously, as I've said already, one area that I was particularly interested and did particularly well in was pronunciation. And that was over sort of a longer period, we were taught that. And I would say that was definitely one of the highlights of the course, along with grammar. We did quite a good couple of sessions on grammar, and we had an assignment on grammar with tutors who helped you look at maybe different ways of presenting grammar so that you weren't stuck in your ways. So Unit 1 is the written exam, and that is a 3-hour exam where you're basically tested on your knowledge of teaching in terms of theoretical and practical, and your knowledge of grammar and vocabulary, lexis, that kind of thing. And then we move on to part 2. The projects are in 3 types of projects. The first 2 you have to go along a certain structure, and the third one is something that you can choose yourself. So they develop your theoretical practice and your research-based practice. Then we have part 3, the module 3, which is pronunciation, which is an interview, which is much scary than it sounds. It's not as scary, sorry, I should say, not as scary as it sounds. Basically, you have to learn about transcription and pronunciation. But one of the things I would say is that the course is really good at preparing you for that part. I felt really prepared. You get a chance to do a mock exam for the pronunciation as well. And when I actually got to the exam, I did a presentation which you also practice with your tutor and did very well in that, so I was very happy with that. And then the famous part 4, which is teaching practice, which is the face-to-face part, which you get obviously practice in teaching, which is obviously an extremely important part of the whole course. It prepares you because the assignments are all geared towards certain parts, different parts of the exams itself. So if you're working hard on the assignment, you're going to be doing better in the exam. It's going to feed into the teaching practice, and also obviously if it's pronunciation, it's going to feed into the pronunciation. My sense was that the harder I worked at the assignments, the better I did in the exam as well. That's an interesting question. I think that the face-to-face part is demanding, but it's also bringing together lots of elements of the whole of the diploma, really. It's putting into practice the sessions that you do with the tutors, it's putting into practice the assignments and sessions you did on the online part, and it's also preparing you for obviously the pronunciation side. So for example, lesson planning for pronunciation is connected in with the interview for pronunciation. And the teaching practice as a whole is interconnected with the written exam because that is practical as well as theoretical. And then I would say in general, the teaching practice part is looking at research-based practice, and that is an umbrella feature across all the modules. I think that in general, the high quality of the tutoring and the friendliness of the tutors is the 2 things that I remember. The standard was very high in terms of the way that we were tutored and the knowledge base. But you can be in a course where people have very high standards, very knowledgeable, but they're not very friendly or they're quite distant, whereas I didn't find that at all. They're actually very helpful. Well, one of the things that I've started doing is materials writing on quite a small scale. I've had one project so far for a well-known international publisher. So that's one of the things that I've done since the diploma, which is really interesting. And the other thing, I guess, one of the reasons why I wanted to do it was to move into teacher training more, because that's a real passion of mine.